Yeah.
Good morning to everyone here in the Zurich Impact Hub and also to everyone tuning in over our live stream. Welcome to our latest installment of the BearingPoint Talks, today with the topic of networks and unstructured data in customer management. I'm Daniel Abakili, a technology analyst from BearingPoint, and now it's a pleasure for me to be your host today. And also, first we will have our talk, then at the end there is the opportunity for a Q&A session, so we will have questions from the live audience here and also for our live chat from people joining us on the live stream. So today my guests are Ralf Schonenbach, the CEO from Envoy. Envoy is a platform that leverages an organization's employees' relationships in a trusted manner to increase their sales opportunities. He held senior positions with the firms Anderson and Ernst & Young, and he co-founded the Trestle Group and the Trestle Group Foundation. Good morning, Ralf.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Also here with me is Dr. Dorian Selz, CEO and founder of Squirro. Squirro is an advanced context intelligence and insight solution that analyzes structured and unstructured data with machine learning to generate insights. Dorian founded Local.ch and made it market leader in 4 years. He was partner and COO at Nemix, the largest e-business consultancy in Switzerland and Germany, and he also held a PhD from the University of St. Gallen. Good morning, Dorian.
Thank you for having me.
And as a subject matter expert from BearingPoint, we have Ulf Sanger, who is a senior manager in the digital and strategy practice. His home turf is digital customer management, and he has 18 years of experience in consumer goods industries. Good morning, Ulf.
Good morning.
So, on the topic of networks and unstructured data today, we know that our personal and corporate networks keep growing day to day, and we have more and more accounts to manage. And also there's a lot of information about these contexts, be it in our emails, in our notes, or in the CRM systems itself. However, it's not always easy to retrieve this kind of information out of all these different places and systems, also since much of the data is unstructured. So in this talk today, we would like to explore how companies and individuals can leverage this kind of information to gain more insights about the networks and accounts and the context they have. So to start off and get a feeling for this topic, Dorian, can you tell us what are the main pain points at the moment that keep companies from leveraging this kind of information?
The fact that the data that we deal with here is so-called unstructured, a very technical term for data sets such as an example, email, call notes, presentations, contracts outside of the company, maybe research or news. It's all perfectly digestible for us humans. If you feed that stuff to a computer can do little with it. There is a very simple way to test that. Take any of these type of data sets, add them to an Excel, try to make a sum. The result will be hashtag value, or better say nonsensical. That makes it so hard, even though you have all these data sets, to do anything sensible with.
Okay. So yes, we can't put everything in a spreadsheet, unfortunately. So Rolf, how does this translate to networks? What do you experience?
I mean, what we see across organizations is that many companies have invested a lot of money and resources into CRM systems, but we find that most people really don't trust sharing all of their valuable context with the company. So you have limited information or visibility into the employee networks across the organization. And if you do have data in CRM, a lot of it is out of date. And also as an individual, our networks are spread across many platforms, so LinkedIn, Gmail, Zing, our phone, and to get a big picture of this network and pull it all together, it's very difficult.
I agree there. I also myself have a lot of these social media accounts. Ulf, I guess it goes the same way with you. What is your experience from the industry? What the pain points are?
What we see is actually that a lot of data is stored in data silos across the world in global companies. They have segregated in different systems, not synchronized each other. That makes it hard actually to leverage the know-how and the networks and data insights they have. Just giving an example, we've seen this year with a luxury company, with a fashion retailer. They externalized their entire campaign management. So actually personalization is not really possible, etc. And then leveraging data insight is quite just sort of impossible at the very moment.
Yeah, so we have a lot of unstructured data, a lot of structured data distributed over many different systems. So with all these systems, what are actually the requirements of the companies today? So Dorian, could you give us an example from the industry that you experienced yourself? What requirements are there out there?
Sure. Maybe just pick a customer of ours to explain a bit what's possible if you deal with those type of data sets well. Investec is a medium-sized asset management company based in London and South Africa. They came to us a couple of years ago with the following conundrum. An average relationship manager in their asset management arm, she has to deal with anywhere between maybe 15 to 20 clients on one end, but on the other end with a fund universe that is often in the hundreds of funds big. Any fund is a collection of securities. And on any of these securities and the funds, there is lots of news, lots of research, lots of market insights, market events that impact the performance of these funds. I always call it's a kind of like a too much for too little. Technically, it's possible if you spend the entire time, the entire day and the entire week reading through all the materials about all those funds to be knowledgeable and perfectly in the know about what happens in all these funds. It's just a kind of like impossibility because, well, first, the day has just about 24 hours. And even if you do that, the next day you're going to repeat that exercise. So the result of the affair is that many of these relationship managers are actually not in the know what happens with their funds that they deal with on a day-to-day basis for their clients, on behalf of their clients. They miss out, as an example, on personnel changes, something that directly impacts negatively any fund's performance. They miss out on significant events and the underlying securities of which those funds are composed, and. And here comes in a solution like ours that do exactly that. Namely, while you focus on the interaction with your customers, go and correlate and monitor all those data sets and bring back to you, here are the 3 funds, Daniel, that you need to look at today, because there was a management change, there was an allocation change, there was somewhere a substantial change of the mandate in such a fund, and it relates to those 3 clients of yours. To free up time of you to actually work with your clients, what they want to do as a reaction to this change situation. That's where the actual value is.
Yeah, thanks. So now, when I now know what kind of things are happening in the world and to what context I should talk to, maybe how do I even know who to talk to? And I guess that's where you come involved. So.
Yeah, I mean, if we just continue with the example in financial services, if you look at a bank, for example, you have a lot of senior people across the organization in finance, IT, operations, risk. These people all have valuable networks that could help the bank get new clients, but the relationship managers don't know that these relationships exist. So all of this huge part of the organization is sitting, and it's an untapped resource for the organization. And with Envoy, you would be able to bring the networks of the whole organization together and see where you have opportunities. And then the RMs could work with the managing directors or the senior people in the organization to discuss if there's opportunities to bring new clients into the organization. So it would open up huge new sales channels that have never been explored before in an efficient way.
Ulf, what are your thoughts on the requirements we have? So we have networks, we have this, what Dorian told us. What is your experience?
Having a look, for instance, at larger B2B corporations, right? In account management, you have a lot of unstructured data out of news feeds, news, background checks, whatsoever, research papers. And in account management, actually, it is really necessary to have the full 360 degree, not only on your transactional stuff, but even on the background. Giving an example, for instance, you have a client and his subsidiary is going out into Chapter 11. That is just a useful information. And as earlier as possible, it makes sense out of a business value perspective. So, and actually to involve these information in your entire account management is by then crucial.
So we really see there is a need for the businesses and individuals to have a 360 degree view of whatever they are dealing with currently. So we already heard the term data silos, so not all data is stored in the same way. What kind of other constraints do you see for this to be realized actually in today's up-to-date state-of-the-art customer management systems?
It has different perspective. One is actually that you have mostly a segregation, very strong, between different departments in a company. So you have IT and you have business. But actually to make it, the important message is here actually that to have the business value and the customer perspective of your first priority. Otherwise you are just dealing with each perspective, but it's not connected to each other. So it's not an IT issue, it's clearly a customer focus and business value perspective. And that's actually one of the main topics. I mean, you have a lot of big data, but actually what is the relevant information you need actually to extract and from which data sources? And by then you can make the right decisions in terms of effectivity, efficiency, and customer management.
Are there also any other limitations based on systems that are currently existing in the company already, or do you don't see a problem there or a constraint there?
Well, if the more you have segregated system, it makes it much harder, of course. So having sort of a platform ecosystem perspective that makes it a bit easier. But you need to have actually a look really what is actually delivering the business value out of it.
Yeah, so legacy systems seems to be
Right,
a real
absolutely.
big problem in there, right? These are
That's
basically
the most,
segregation.
yeah, that's the most problem companies are dealing with, legacy.
Yeah, I see. Rolf, do you have any comments on that, or what is your experience with big data projects like aggregation, for example?
Well, I mean, I think one of the challenges we see is if you take a global organization, depending on how they've grown, either through acquisition or organic growth, a lot of the organizations are managed around regions or countries or cities. So you have a lot of different CRM instances across the organization. So you might have one for Switzerland, you might have one for the UK, you might have one for the US, and these systems aren't really talking to each other. But I think that the biggest fundamental change that has to happen is to realize that CRM is a perfect platform for managing leads and managing your sales pipeline, but we need to look at a different approach to actually getting access to the contacts that the employees have, and we need to realize that irregardless of how fancy the CRM system is, people still don't feel comfortable sharing their contacts, and if they don't feel comfortable, then your dashboards don't look very good. So that's a change that we have to accept, and I think that what we see is regardless if it's Envoy or not, people need to own their contact data. It needs to be portable, and then they need to be able to plug and play into different CRM environments so that we can leverage the CRM functionality, but keep the data private to the individual. And I think this is a big change that needs to happen.
Definitely agree. So a lot of trust issues regarding different CRM systems. We have different systems, different information systems, a lot of legacy systems. So now begs the question, how can we solve all this? How can we get around from all these different things? So now, Dorian, would you have an example, or what are your ideas or approaches how we could solve this segregated information problem?
Sure. To pick up on Ralph's point about CRMs and being stores of data, right? A CRM today, a way to describe that is it's Excel on steroids. You input data and you have multiple worksheets of that, and we all know in the moment we have multiple worksheets of Excel, the resulting aggregation is most of the times pretty messy. So it is with CRMs. Why it is so? Because most of those aggregation approaches that we have today, and they're perfectly fine for numeric data, right? Don't follow me what I'm going to outline here for anything financial, because otherwise you end up in Enron territory. But most of the data is not of financial type. It is, as an example, a call note about an interaction you had with a customer. It is about, as an example, an inbound request. So there, what we see is, instead of going that traditional ETL road, extract, transform, load, that pre-requires a very precise way of matching one Excel or CRM to the other one. What we see happening is that you have a more fluid way to correlate data sets from, say, source A to source B to source C. That is that, as an example, an inbound request in one system from a certain person might be perfectly well be able to correlate, as an example, to a know-how item in another database. How? By actually applying a bit of a mix of probabilistic and AI technologies to combine that into one single know-how item, if I may say so. In that sense, I think one needs to think rather more like, in the broader public, what we do every day in terms of like go a Google approach, right? Look at the Google result list. The Google result list is not, in absolute terms, the best result on place number one that there is. It is the result that, with a number of factors, your personal history, your search history, what Google thinks about a couple of other things, the best possible answer to that query. By no means it's the best in absolute terms. So what I say here, it's essentially shades of gray. You approximate the best outcome. And in many customer situations, that's the thing how it works, right? You ask me a question, I might not have the best answer. I give you the best possible answer in that very moment. And that kind of, you shift a bit of the thinking. Instead of going with a very structured, deterministic approach, which is good for finance, go with a probabilistic, best, next best action type of thinking after these rather distributed data sets. And then you're gonna get a good first step to have meaningful results that might not be in absolute terms the truth, but might be the next best action to make, as an example, a customer interaction a more pleasurable exercise than before.
I agree. Approximation is definitely necessary with all this unstructured data. And however, for example, for contact information, I guess approximation may not be the best strategy at all times. Ralph, do you have any insights on what kind of aggregation you're doing in your company?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we need to build on the concept of a network asset manager. So how do we manage our networks as an asset? And today, we all say that our networks are an asset, but how easy is it to actually mobilize that network? And if I look over the past 10 years or 12 years since LinkedIn started, our networks have grown exponentially. So where 100, 200 relationships might have been the business cards I had on my desk, today I have thousands of connections. And when I look at those thousands of connections, I have no insights where to focus. And that's the biggest challenge I see as individuals. We have a lot of valuable relationships in there. And what I find fascinating about what Dorian is doing is that he can help bring in these triggers and these insights that would say, you should focus on this part of your network based on what you want to accomplish because there's something happening here. And that would really help people in general because, it wouldn't be this random process of starting from A and then scheduling meetings until you get down through Z, which we never even get down to Z because we give up at G. So I think that, let's start treating our networks as real assets and build the systems around that so that it actually can be managed properly.
Thanks. Rolf, what do you see as overall solutions or approaches in addition to what Rolf and Dorian told us?
Just one of the approaches, and this is just from my perspective, one of the key success factors here is just create transparency across the entire firm, probably. If possible, of course, there are restrictions in terms of regulation and that stuff, but tear down the walls, because otherwise you do not get actually the 360 degree, you do not get actually the transparency about the informations about clients, about contacts, about accounts, transactions, customer management, service, marketing, sales, etc. If you have that segregated, that's sort of the basic, right? If you have segregated systems here, which are just, and you're dealing with interface and that stuff, it's really hard to manage. So actually, that's sort of a change management approach, create the transparency, because then you're just going away from the data side.
And this heavily relates to the trust part we had with the networks, right? Okay, so now we heard we had a lot of legacy systems, unstructured, structured information. Now, if we want to look a bit in the future, so how could this change in the future? What kind of new technologies could come in there? And now, Dorian, to you, I know Squirro has its roots in financial services, so rather structured approach with factoring in unstructured information. Do you also have a use case or an example from other industries, for example, the manufacturing and production industries, how this could go forward into all the other industries from there?
Yes, I do, Daniel, and I love to talk about it. Buhler, I don't know if it's known to listeners here in the show this morning or people here in the audience. Buhler is the world leader in milling machine and food processing equipment. So they produce mills to, as an example, do the wheat with which we had our Gipfeli just before the start of the show. Or if you guys going to have a bit of salad this afternoon for lunch, olive oil, 60% chance it's a Müller mill that this has been processed with. So they really own that hard to make big equipment milling machines. Now the thing is, this is part of something that concerns us all, namely food chains, right? From the moment some potatoes leave a farm all the way to we have them for as an example, lunch. And in our industrialized world, there is a lot of food processing going on. And in the moment you say food processing, you also say potential risks. Things like spillage, things like, as an example, chemicals that suddenly are contaminating food, all types of bacterial and virus diseases that could affect the quality of the food. So what we did together with Buhler is the world's first food risk monitoring solution. It's called SafeFood.ai. It's available online for everybody, free to use, where we, from thousands and thousands, millions of sources, gather information about potential food risks in the whole food chain across the globe. things like salmonella infections, things like just last week in Germany, glass splinters in some packaged bread, or things like E. coli bacteria and all the rest of it. By the way, if you look at it, it's a good diet. Now, why do we do that? The reason is very simple. Food affects us all. We need to know what we eat. And this is a perfect example of how you can apply these type of technologies also outside, say, financial services, by taking in all types of internal and external data sets, combine them, aggregate them, analyze them, and be able to say, here is something you should or you should not do. And that is a very powerful way to monitor actually risks in the food chain.
So we can expect to see a lot of, I guess, dashboards in the end of all this aggregated information to give us hints like on where to act next in all different kinds of industries. Good. Now to another topic regarding predictive sales. Also in the future with this technology, I guess this is the next logical step to take. If you have all these informations, how can we make business out of it? Rolf, what are your insights? How do you think this kind of digital insights can impact predictive sales?
Well, I think that if we can get a bigger view on the relationship capital of an organization, there's tremendous opportunity. So today it's a very small view, mainly concentrated within the sales organization. But if you could take that whole senior layer of an organization globally and tap into that, that would be your starting point. And then if you marry that with resources like Dorian provides, then you're able to get a bigger view on that portfolio, and actually, instead of reactively sourcing clients, you could proactively source clients based on where you see assets in this relationship capital. And that's what I find extremely exciting, because you would be able to go down by industry or by company, and you would say, okay, we have a huge strength of relationships in the pharma industry that we didn't even know that we have. We should really invest some time to see if we have solutions for that or if we should go into that. But today, if you look at an organization, no organization has any clue what the relationships are across that whole senior management part of the company. So I think that with innovative technologies and ways that balance people's ability to keep control of their data and privacy, we'll have much more transparency into these opportunities.
Yeah, thanks. Ulf, how do you see that predictive sales in the future?
It goes in the direction actually Ralph pointed out, especially in the topic just gradually it's sort of effectivity and efficiency in sales. We've seen that recently in a manufacturing company, which has been just segregated in several business units, etc., with the relevant systems, and each sales team dedicated to the GPUs has been actually dealing with their accounts, but actually they are global accounts. Right, so one team doesn't know what the other is doing. Actually creating the transparency first, and the second is actually just dealing with the topic then, how do you actually make a predictive sales just out of your classic reporting that needs different tools, enriched by unstructured data. And then it's going to be very interesting to see how the efficiency in sales is rated. I think that's one of the major topics which is really evolving more and more.
So yeah, information aggregation will be the key in the end. Dorian, do you have any additional comments, thoughts on that? Predictive sales in the future?
I think sales, depending on the type of product category, will be still a people business. Say B2B sales is B2B sales is a people business. I don't foresee anyone suddenly buying for hundreds of thousands of dollars or Swiss francs, hardware or software, kind of like in the cloud without ever having spoken to the vendor. For a number of good reasons, because these are normally complicated systems to introduce and all the rest of it. So for those aspects, as an example, what can predictive do? It can guide you to maybe the more valuable opportunities. It can guide you to, just like Ulf said, see a more broader and more complete picture about what to do next. That I see. I will see also that predictive sales will have a lot of potential in say B2C markets, where it is all about automation and actually large flows of people that you can compute out certain patterns and then obviously reply to them. So I see it depends a bit on which area you want to apply these type of technologies and how to apply them.
Let
assumption here. B2C is going to be a completely different topic. So what we see here is evolving that you have machine-based transaction chatbot-based, for instance, and that create patterns. And out of these patterns, you can just sort of predict certain reactions, what is recommendable as the next best action to offer as a service or as a product to customers. And by then, you get a much better data insight. Of course, your product, your service will change, and you know clearly much more about your target groups.
So, as I hear from all this from all these points, is that there will be a lot of automation happen in the future. There will be a lot of information provided, and I guess one could raise the fear that in the end you're kind of taking away the sales instinct from the salespeople themselves, right? Because now we have algorithms and structured data. So, how is your view on that? Will our sales team be replaced more or less with algorithms in certain areas, of course?
Dorian says that people buy from people, and I mean there has to be a solid product behind it. But I mean I've also seen not solid products sold because the person has a good relationship. So I think that that's not going to go away. I think that what will help salespeople is that intuition. I don't know if it's a science or if it's more of a gut feel, but I think that with more information that helps a person navigate their networks, they'll be more effective with their time. And I think that that's what's really critical right now. It's not that we don't have the relationships. It's which relationships do I focus on today? Which relationships do I need to warm up and keep them alive for the future when I need that? And if you have 2,000 connections, it's virtually impossible. I mean, you really go back to Excel, and that's not fun.
What I think is that certain steps within the entire sales funnel will be automated, and certain will definitely be a personal issue, as Rolf mentioned. That means actually you have exactly the support you need on one hand, on the other hand, it's just.
So we see that technology will be facilitating in the future on what we should actually focus on a day-to-day business, and not making us precise action plans on what to do, just because there's so much of noise to cut through, which is probably not human possible on a daily basis. As you mentioned before, Dorian, if you read all the information every morning, we probably don't get to work that day or every day at anything. So thank you very much. That was most of the questions we had covered in this talk. So now I would like to open to the audience here in the Impact Hub, and also over the live stream through the live chat, if you have any questions. So for any of them, feel free to ask.
Thank you very much for your insights. I heard the term relationship asset management. Do you have any example of a company where that cultural change, so that people would open up and share their networks for the good of the company, that actually worked? And what kind of factors played into this cultural change?
I wish I did, but in my discussions, I don't find that. I find the same feedback all the time. Yes, we have CRM, but I would never put my contacts in CRM. And you can't force me. These are my relationships, and if I leave, I want those relationships to go with me. I do see, from the outside in, organizations like McKinsey, for example, use their networks very well and are very effective. I have no insights into the actual systems that they use, but I do see that the McKinsey network, the alumni of McKinsey are very helpful in keeping that business running. So there are companies, I would say, that have such networks and such a culture, but I don't find that this is the norm. I find that this is quite the exception.
On one hand, you have the relationships in the CRM, but it doesn't help actually, even if the person is leaving the company, the remaining company has this contact in their database, but that doesn't help actually to maintain that relationship. It will stay a personal relationship.
Okay, so then we have a question from our live chat, which actually goes into the same direction, and rather with a concern about that, or asking what kinds of benefits and problems do you see from consolidating all this unstructured information in regards to the GDPR that we now have. So being able to relate all this kind of information back to certain people extracting it. What is your view on that?
Well, GDPR, one of the, I think, overlooked aspects of GDPR is the so-called subject access request. By GDPR law, you have now an opportunity to go at any company and ask, what do you have about me? And if you don't reply as a company to that request within a certain amount of time, you're liable to fees and punishment and whatever else. Now, the thing is this. If you're not consolidating and aggregating your company data well, you'll not be able to make a truthful statement to that subject access request. In the moment you not do that, you open up yourself to a second charge of liability, right? Because you have not truthfully replied to that subject access request. So whether we like it or not, one of the overlooked pieces of GDPR forces any company to think through its data aggregation strategy, because for good reason not everything is probably in one pot, but is distributed in a number of pots, say from CRM to production systems to service systems. But the subject access request thing makes a uniform request across all of these. And there is another aspect to it, and I'm waiting to hear that. If I'd be a bad boy with some relationship to some Eastern European cyber stalkers, I'd simply file a gazillion subject access requests to one company, right? And then about 3 hours before the 72 hours time period goes over, I'd call there and say, listen folks, I can make this go away if you wire some bitcoins to whatever bank account, right? Because the consequence of this not going away, you're going to be put up in court. So whether we like it or not, you need to increase your capacity to reply to such pieces. It will become, whether we like it or not, something that every business has to do. It will be simply going concern, these kind of requests. It takes another year or 2 or 3 till somebody figures this out properly and till it made its way through the courts, but it is not something that we should deal lightly with.
Any other comments from Ulf or Ralph?
I mean, just from my side, I see that with GDPR, it's really put a spotlight on, well, also on CRM data. And from my perspective, where we used to think of these relationships in CRM as an asset, they're now potentially a huge liability. And I think that, what I find with Envoy is the approach that the networks are stored at the individual level where the relationships are, and the CRM then manages the existing client relationships. And this balance of two is, I think, a perfect way to overcome GDPR. So individuals own the relationships with the people that they know, which is allowed by GDPR. And at an aggregated level, you have a good view of your existing client base. So that's how we're tackling this topic. And I see that there's a lot of opportunities for organizations to leverage this construct.
I mean, it's just another point of view is here. If you just collect unstructured data, you need to be aware just what kind of aggregation do I do, just which information do I really involve in my systems and which not, for instance. Giving just a simple example is birthday. If you just get some information like that, do I collect those or just leave it away? Really, and that's sort of a decision you need to make.
Thanks. Are there other questions? Yeah, way up there.
So I have a question about, it's a broader question, and I think the whole area you're hitting on around relationship assets, information assets, is part of a bigger theme about data in all information right now that we're all living with. What do you think has to change in the minds of business and IT to start really understanding the value of this information and how to leverage it properly?
I think it needs maybe a couple of more years and a different type of CFO/CEO. Let me explain. If you open up any reporting of any mid-sized to large-sized company, you will find substantial expense, both CapEx and OpEx, in investments in data acquisition, into data upkeep, and all the rest that's associated with IT infrastructure and the like. If any of those investments would be put to the quite normal test of business, what's my return on investment? In almost all cases, it is about the same like you would buy a lovely Tesla, drive it from the dealership to your home and throw away the key and never use it again, right? That's what data is all about. The Economist points to the fact just about 1% on average of data acquired is actually put to use. As I said, just like driving a car once to your home and then never use it again. Now, if you're in another line of business, say I spoke about Buhler, if Buhler makes a capital investment into a new production line, and the investment proposal reads like, we're going to invest in this magnificent new factory, we're going to invite all for an opening ceremony, but immediately after the opening ceremony we'll close the factory and never use it again, guess what? That person probably gets the boot on that very moment he or she makes that proposition, right? So the thinking in a line of business to make capital to use, put it to use and make something valuable with it on behalf of the company, that same thinking needs to come into the whole IT and the whole internet, whatever you want to call it, data function of a company. And I think that's a question of the people who are in there, that's a question of the views and technologies that are there. But I do not think a CIO will ever go away again in 3-5 years by making a capital investment proposition where he cannot or she cannot justify the return on investment to her CEO.
I think also we're at a bit of a crossroad from a consumer perspective because we don't really know how much data to share. So we're kind of like, do I share all my Fitbit data or do I keep it private? And I think it's also a generational thing. I mean, I see a younger generation that clicks on accept everything and data is going everywhere and we don't know how this data is being used. So I think as consumers, we're going to have to decide, do we want to plug into this world of all these exciting opportunities that can be delivered to us if that data is given to them and if we're compensated for that data in some way? Or do we feel that that's just too much of ourselves out there that could be misused? And I think that that's where I also struggle myself. Every time you read a terms and condition, this is going to access your phone's contacts, it's going to access your email, it's going to do that. And you're like, well, I just wanted to share photos. So what are they doing with all this other stuff? So I think that as a consumer, that's evolving as well. And I think businesses today are almost a bit ahead of the consumer in terms of what they could do with that data if you give it to them. But I think the consumer, him or herself, is not quite comfortable yet. Do I want to do that? And what's the consequence of that?
I mean, an interesting point is here just a lot of companies are going to Silicon Valley actually to have a look at what's going on. But from my perspective, it's just definitely China and how data-driven business models are working in China and how transactions, etc., interaction with customers and companies are just done out in China. I mean, that's a complicated picture. I mean, of course, you can judge it in a different manner in terms of transparency and 360 or just single person. How data-driven models are really working. That's what they have to do in China instead of the US.
Maybe to the point earlier on, you made Rolf that I'm certainly not going to put my data into the CRM. Have you seen any incentive models which would facilitate something like this?
Well, I've seen the old school one. We pay you, so put your contacts in.
Maybe a bit more innovative.
I think one of the challenges that it's really hard you have to have accountability in this whole process. So if I do make that introduction, there needs to be an auditable trail that I get credit for that. And oftentimes I make the introduction, and then as the number of discussions go on, my benefit kind of fades away, and then I don't get compensated for that. So I think there has to be a very transparent model in place for how a person is rewarded, and you have to track that quite carefully. But I've not seen, beyond just, a commission type model or an incentive that really works getting people to share contacts. So not specifically with CRM.
Interesting point is here, it depends a bit on CRM system as well. Because modern CRM systems are completely focusing not only on the data side, but on the collaboration around the accounts and contacts, including all the global workflows whatsoever. And if you do not have these data stored in CRM, actually your collaboration is not going to work. So that is sort of a policy-driven, system-based incentivization.
We see an interesting experiment in our own company. We obviously use the stuff we sell, do that to ourselves. So as an example, in our own CRM, we score out leads for a BD team. And if the BD team wants to be successful, they got to know now it's probably the best place to look at, because the system in itself scores them out the leads that have the highest chance and the highest probability for them to be successfully converted into an opportunity. And while at the beginning, and as always, these kind of things take time. Tony yesterday, when the system for whatever bloody hell had a little hiccup for 2 minutes, complained pretty loudly on the internal messaging system that the system was down. Where are my leads? I need to make my quota today. Right? So instead of suddenly being just a system of record, for him it starts to make the transition to be a system of insight. Yep.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, I'd like to wrap it up. So we want to have 360-degree views of our customers, and about all the data we have. There's issues with a lot of segregated data systems, with legacy systems, but there are hopes that we can aggregate all this information with solutions like provided from Envoy, provided from Squirro, and this sorts of. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this is going to work out in the future. And at this point, I want to end the talk. Thank you very much for all of you being here. Dorian, Ralph, Ulf, it was a pleasure to have a talk with you. And also thank you very much for the live audience here in the Impact Hub in Zurich, and also for everyone who joined us over the live stream. And I hope you have a great day for the rest of it. See you next time.
Thank you.